I'm Jenny Nichols, Culinary Coordinator at Central Market Mill Creek. Today we're going to make a delicious, tender, flaky pie crust that's easy to roll. This pie crust is great for sweet or savory applications. You can make an apple pie, you can make a quiche, you can make a pot pie, whatever you like. Whenever you're baking, you always want to use the scoop and level method to measure your flour. So I'm going to scoop the flour into the measuring cup until it's kind of piled on the top, and then level it off. I'm going to add 3 cups of all-purpose flour with 1½ teaspoons of salt. Then I'm going to add a ½ cup of butter, cold, cut into pieces. Then I'm going to use a pastry cutter to start cutting it into the flour. Some people do this with 2 knives. Some people use a fork to cut the butter in. If you're working in a warm room, it helps to chill down the flour and all of your equipment. You can measure the flour into a bowl and put that in the fridge, and then any beater attachments or anything else you're using, put it in the fridge for about 10 or 15 minutes. Now I'm going to put in 1 cup of cold lard or shortening, also cut into small pieces. You do want to try to work quickly. You don't want the butter and the lard to get warm. The whole point is to keep it cold so you have chunks in the flour. If it starts to get too warm and melt into the flour, and then you get a tough crust. So the whole key to keeping it tender and flaky is having everything cold. Lastly, I'm going to use 3/4 cups of ice water, but you might not need all of the water. The advantage of making it a little bit wet is once it's had a good rest in the fridge and it's nice and cold, it's actually easier to roll. I'm just going to sprinkle a little flour on the board, not a ton, but just enough that it won't stick. Get all those loose pieces. Now this is for 2 crusts, so I'm going to cut it in half. And then wrap it in plastic for it to go in the fridge. Before I wrap it, I'm actually going to press it into a disc. If you store it in a disc instead of a ball, again, you're kind of already halfway there when you go to roll it out. And you can use the plastic to kind of press it and get a nice round disc. And then once those are wrapped, they're ready to go in the fridge, and you want to let them rest for at least 2 hours before you use them. Before you roll your crust, you want to let it sit at room temperature for about 10 or 15 minutes. I have a little piece that I baked just so I can show you how tender and flaky it is. Look at that. So now you are ready to impress all your friends and family with your homemade pie crust.